They've become a byword for brutality in Ukraine, the Wagner Group, war.
Со стрелковым оружием на бронетехнику.
This is a recruitment video for the notorious Wagner Group, a Russian private military company which normally operates in the shadow.
Был случай, видел, привезли 2 человек на полигоне, расстреляли публичным путем.
He says such killings of Wagner troops were routine.
Welcome to The Debate. Hello, we are back here with Command Figures. I want you to imagine a battlefield for a second. The soldier kicking down a door or pulling a trigger isn't fighting for a national flag or a president or a constitution.
Right. They are fighting to boost the Q3 earnings of a corporate board.
Exactly. A board sitting thousands of miles away in some climate-controlled boardroom. It is a jarring image, but it is increasingly the reality of modern conflict.
And it completely shatters the illusion most of us still hold about warfare, right? For 4 centuries, we've operated on this traditional Westphalian idea. This concept that only legitimate nation-states get to declare war, command armies, and, hold a monopoly on violence. But today, the combatants wearing tactical gear are just as likely to be wearing corporate lanyards.
Yeah, it's wild. We are looking at the ultimate privatization of the ultimate public function, which is state violence. So today, we are unpacking how we arrived at this landscape.
Right, the timeline is fascinating.
It really is. How did we get from small teams of former special forces operating in the shadows in the 1960s, groups like David Sterling's Watch Guard, to the massive corporate entities we see today?
Entities that literally dictate the outcomes of modern wars.
Exactly. We're talking about the explosive growth of private military companies, or PMCs, in the 1990s with firms like Executive Outcomes. Then, their industrialization during the Iraq War with Blackwater and Halliburton.
All the way up to the contemporary era.
Right, to state-sponsored proxy armies like Russia's Wagner Group. The central tension here is whether these companies are a pragmatic, inevitable tool of modern statecraft or, a fundamental threat to global security. I argue they are an essential, highly efficient tool for global logistics and security.
And I argue that treating war like a corporate supply chain masks a deeply disturbing reality. Superpowers are using mercenaries specifically to fight dirty wars without political accountability.
Well,
when you introduce a corporate profit motive into armed conflict, you create a system where peace is fundamentally bad for the bottom line. It incentivizes the prolongation of war.
I understand the discomfort with the profit motive, I really do. But you have to look at the structural mechanics of why these companies exist in the first place.
Okay, let's hear it.
Following the end of the Cold War, Western militaries underwent massive downsizing. They completely gutted their quartermaster corps and their logistical support networks, mainly to save money.
Right, the peace dividend.
Exactly. Yet, the geopolitical demands on these states didn't shrink. If anything, they became far more complex. States needed a way to project power, maintain these massive global supply lines, and manage security in unstable regions.
But without a draft.
Yes! They had to do it without instituting a politically toxic military draft. PMCs filled a critical mathematical void. The military simply didn't have the manpower anymore.
I hear the math argument, but let's talk about the psychological void they fill. Because honestly, that is the real danger. Now, if you were listening to this, you might be thinking, why does a superpower need to hire armed guards if it has the greatest military on Earth?
It's a fair question.
The answer lies in the mechanics of public consent. Specifically, something called the Abrams Doctrine.
Ah, yes. Post-Vietnam.
Right. After Vietnam, U.S. General Crichton Abrams wanted to ensure the military never went to war again without the full backing of the public. The idea is simple. If an operation cannot garner enough public support to involve regular troops and reserve units, the war shouldn't happen.
Because relying on regular troops means the public feels the cost of the war directly.
Precisely. But by outsourcing the war to private contractors, governments neatly bypass that democratic check. They avoid the public backlash of official military casualties.
I mean, contractor deaths aren't highly publicized.
A perpetual, low-level war without ever having to genuinely ask the voting public for permission.
I'll admit, the optics of bypassing public scrutiny are uncomfortable. But we have to look at the alternative. Are you suggesting we stretch a volunteer military to its absolute breaking point just to build cafeterias and drive fuel trucks in Baghdad?
I'm saying the scale is the problem.
Let's look at the sheer scale of the post-9/11 reality then. By 2007, the United States relied on 180,000 private contractors in Iraq.
Which is staggering.
It drastically outnumbered the 160,000 regular troops on the ground. PMCs like Halliburton's KBR were the logistical backbone of the entire operation. They built 90% of the forward operating bases.
But at what cost?
They moved the fuel, they moved the ammunition, they fed the soldiers. Conventional armed forces simply aren't designed to deploy that kind of sustained, tailored capability at scale anymore.
You call it a tailored capability, but let's contextualize what that logistical miracle actually looked like in reality. KBR's contract garnered the firm $20.1 billion.
Logistics are expensive.
Yes, but to put that in perspective, the U.S. government handed a private corporation roughly 3 times the entire cost of fighting the 1991 Persian Gulf War, just to build tents and move supplies.
Well, the scope of the occupation was different.
Sure, but intertwined with those massive profits were $2.2 billion in overcharges, undocumented costs, and just sheer waste. We literally lost track of billions of dollars. That isn't logistical efficiency. That is the definition of war profiteering.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective.
Okay.
The financial waste is an issue of bureaucratic auditing, not a flaw in the fundamental concept itself. Outsourcing in warfare is conceptually no different than a corporation outsourcing its IT or its global supply chain.
I have to strongly disagree with that comparison.
Just hear me out. If you want specialized security, rapid base construction, or even the training of 15,000 Afghan police officers, which a company like DynCorp did, why would you rely on a slow, rigid military bureaucracy? The private market provides top-tier specialists who can spin up operations in weeks instead of years.
Because a corporate IT department doesn't operate in a legal void where they can kill 17 civilians in a Baghdad traffic circle and face absolutely zero immediate consequences.
Well, Nisor Square, that is where the outsourcing analogy completely falls apart. When a supply chain vendor makes a mistake, packages arrive late. When a PMC operating in a conflict zone acts with deliberate aggression, as Blackwater contractors did in Nisor Square in 2007, innocent people die.
Nisor Square was a horrific tragedy. Nobody is defending the actions of those specific contractors.
But it highlights the mechanical flaw in the system. Because they were private contractors, the military chain of command couldn't simply court-martial them on the spot.
That's a jurisdictional issue, yeah.
Right. General Karl Horst, who was responsible for military security in Baghdad at the time, explicitly complained about this. He said, these private security guys run loose, escalate force, shoot people, and then drive away.
Leaving the military to clean it up.
Exactly. Leaving the regular military to deal with the political and strategic aftermath. It actively poisoned the counterinsurgency effort. The military was trying to win hearts and minds, and the PMCs were operating like rogue cowboys because they answered to a corporate contract, not the Uniform Code of Military Justice.
That is a fair critique of the regulatory environment back in 2007. But the military did adapt. Contracting standards were tightened and oversight was increased.
Marginally.
Well, you are focusing heavily on the defensive contracting of the 2000s, but that argument completely shifts when you look at how the industry morphed into something entirely different by 2014.
You mean the shift to proxy forces?
Right. The dynamic changes radically when we move from Western defensive logistics to the offensive state-sponsored proxy armies we see today, specifically Russia's Wagner Group.
Oh, this is where the mask fully slips off the PMC industry. If Blackwater was the beta test for avoiding accountability, Wagner represents the full weaponization of the PMC concept.
Absolutely. Originating around the annexation of Crimea and the war in the Donbass.
Right. Wagner allowed Moscow to deploy highly capable combatants while maintaining, plausible deniability. And their operations are defined by a terrifying lack of restraint. They aren't building mess halls. They act as offensive shock troops.
Their methodology is undeniably brutal. We saw it in Ukraine, where Wagner instituted a policy of zeroing out, which is their very clinical euphemism for the summary execution of their own retreating fighters.
It's horrifying.
They recruited thousands of HIV-positive prison inmates, just throwing them into meat grinder offensives in places like Bakhmut.
And it goes far beyond the battlefields of Ukraine, too. We have to look at how they operate mechanically in places like the Central African Republic and Mali.
The resource extraction.
Exactly. Wagner doesn't just provide security. They secure gold and diamond mines to enrich their network. In exchange, they keep authoritarian dictators in power through campaigns of extrajudicial killings, torture, and civilian exploitation. It is a pure resource extraction model built entirely on violence.
The brutality is undeniable, I completely agree. But it actually raises a fundamental question about definitions.
How so?
Well, Vladimir Putin admitted on television that the Russian state fully funded Wagner with $1 billion between May 2022 and May 2023. And we know they utilize Russian Ministry of Defense facilities like Molkino for training.
Yes, they are highly integrated.
So are they actually a private military company? Or are they just a covert branch of the Russian military disguised as one? I mean, we shouldn't blame the concepts of the private market for what is clearly state-directed totalitarian aggression.
I come at it from a different way.
Okay.
The fact that they operate via a corporate profit-driven mechanism is exactly what makes them so dangerous, and it firmly categorizes them as a PMC. They are not structured like a traditional military unit.
They certainly don't act like one.
Right. They are a sprawling network of shell companies. Take a company like Moreau Gold in Sudan. Wagner uses this corporate shell to extract resources, bypass international sanctions, and funnel money back to Moscow. They utilize Western banking systems to process funds.
True, the financial network is massive.
They negotiate mining concessions in exchange for military protection. That is a corporate enterprise through and through.
But they take their marching orders from the Kremlin.
Yes, but they use the corporate loophole to do it. They're the perfect, monstrous culmination of the PMC model. It's a superpower utilizing a privatized corporate structure to fight dirty wars globally because it bypasses both domestic scrutiny and international norms.
It is a dark evolution for sure.
Look at the dictator in the Central African Republic. He needs security against rebels. Wagner provides it. But instead of cash, Wagner takes the mineral rights. No money officially changes hands, which means global financial watchdogs are completely blinded. The profit motive and the state objective are entirely fused.
But that fusion is exactly why we must distinguish between a state-controlled paramilitary proxy like Wagner and heavily regulated logistics firms like G4S or Constellus.
I don't think the line is that clear.
The danger isn't the fundamental concept of a private military company. The danger is a rogue state weaponizing the corporate form as a disguise to evade international law.
But the legal gray zone isn't a bug in the PMC system. It is the central feature. That is the entire reason states use them. The line between a logistical firm and a mercenary group is razor thin when the underlying architecture relies in an accountability vacuum.
See, I have to challenge the idea of an absolute legal vacuum. Under international law, there is no true void. States that hire PMCs retain their obligations under the Geneva Conventions.
In theory, yes.
State is responsible for their conduct. Furthermore, the legal frameworks do exist on a domestic level. The United States has the Military Extraterritorial Jurisdiction Act, or MIJA, which specifically allows for the prosecution of contractors who commit crimes overseas.
MIJA is rarely used effectively, though.
We also have the Montreux Document, which is an international agreement outlining the legal obligations and good practices for states regarding PMCs. The frameworks are there. They simply need stronger enforcement mechanisms, rather than pretending we can abolish PMCs altogether.
Relying on the Montreux Document to stop war crimes is like putting up a "Please drive slowly" sign at the Indy 500.
That's a bit cynical.
It's entirely voluntary. It has no binding enforcement mechanism, and it completely ignores the financial incentives of the participants. And let's look at the reality of enforcement under MIJA. Between 2001 and 2020, how many successful prosecutions were there under that act?
Not many.
A handful. Statistics show that roughly 90% of Iraq's deadly force incidents involving private contractors went completely unprosecuted.
It is exceedingly difficult to prosecute those cases, yes.
It is designed to be impossible. Think about the mechanics of it. You are asking a civilian prosecutor in the United States to investigate a shooting that happened in a hostile war zone thousands of miles away.
Right, gathering evidence is a nightmare.
Gather forensic evidence from a chaotic battlefield and somehow compel Iraqi witnesses to fly to America to testify in a civilian court? It doesn't work. PMCs sit in this deliberately constructed gray zone.
Between civilian and soldier.
Exactly. Under international humanitarian law, they aren't quite civilians because they carry weapons, protect military assets, and engage in combat. But they aren't quite soldiers either, because they aren't bound by military tribunals, they can quit their jobs tomorrow, and they ultimately operate for corporate shareholders.
But you can't simply regulate away the economic reality that states require these services. If we ban PMCs, how do we secure embassies in high-risk environments like Yemen or Sudan?
That's a different scale, though.
Do we stretch the regular military even thinner? The solution to 90% of incidents going unprosecuted isn't to abolish a $240 billion industry. It is to establish special international tribunals or implement stricter rules of engagement tied directly to the funding contracts. The market itself does exert a form of discipline.
Does it? Really?
Yes, because most PMCs rely on their reputation for delivering stability to secure future government contracts. If a company fails to secure a site or provokes endless insurgencies through reckless behavior, they lose their next bid. They're motivated to perform well.
The law of the market completely fails in a war zone. If a PMC commits human rights abuses in a remote village in Mali, who is holding them to account?
Well,
The local population being terrorized has no power to cancel their corporate contract. The authoritarian government that hired them actually wants the abuses to continue because it suppresses the rebellion and keeps them in power.
that is a specific type of client, though.
But the international community is usually too disconnected to intervene. The market only disciplines companies when there is transparency, and the PMC industry operates almost entirely in the shadows.
Which circles back to my point about Wagner. The issue in Mali isn't a failure of the free market. It is the success of a Russian state strategy using a PMC as a geopolitical shield.
But the mechanism they are exploiting, the corporate shell, the privatized logistics, the mercenary recruitment, was pioneered and normalized over the last 30 years by Western states outsourcing their own conflicts. We built the architecture of privatized war.
That's a heavy accusation.
Wagner is just taking it to its logical, terrifying conclusion. When you have a global market projected to reach $366 billion by 2028, you have a massive moral hazard.
Because of the financial stakes.
Exactly. When venture capitalists and private equity firms invest in companies whose primary commodity is armed force, they need conflicts to generate returns. If a PMC helps pacify a region entirely, their contract ends, their revenue drops. The financial incentive isn't peace. The financial incentive is durable disorder.
We have covered incredible ground today. From the tactical realities of base building to the ground strategy of geopolitical shell games. My position remains that while the regulatory frameworks desperately need to catch up to the reality on the ground, private military companies are an indispensable asset.
Even with all the risks?
Yes. States simply cannot project power or maintain global stability today without leveraging the efficiency, speed, and specialized skills of the private market.
And the timeline we have walked through shows an undeniable escalation toward a highly dangerous military-industrial complex. What starts as outsourcing food logistics inevitably slides into outsourcing violence.
It is a slippery slope, I'll admit.
Superpowers use these companies to fight dirty wars, completely evading the democratic accountability of their own citizens. When violence is commodified, peace is inherently at odds with corporate financial interests.
Yet, despite our profound disagreement on the utility of these companies, there are crucial points of convergence here. We both agree that the current international legal framework is alarmingly insufficient for the scale of modern privatized warfare.
The accountability gap is very real.
We also agree that the actions of proxy armies, specifically the Wagner Group, represent a severe threat to international security. The fusion of state imperialism with corporate resource extraction demands serious global scrutiny.
Absolutely.
It leaves us with a lingering question. Can the privatization of war ever truly be brought under the strict regulation of international law? Or does introducing a corporate profit motive to armed conflict fundamentally corrupt the nature of statecraft?
It brings us back to that image we started with. We are replacing the national flag with a corporate invoice, and we have to decide if we are willing to live with the consequences of that transaction.
Thank you for listening. Do not forget to click like and subscribe, and write your opinion in the comment section.